Hey guys, this is Eve. Thanks for tuning into my YouTube channel. This channel is dedicated to exploring various topics of the metaphysics and looking at them from a very occult standpoint. I tell people that my videos are for a very small fraction of the world's population. They're referred to in the Bible as the 144,000. And so these are people who are RH negatives. You're an RH negative, you're 15% or less of the world's population. If you're a black RH negative, then you're 4% or less, okay? So I want to address an issue that I was talking about in one of my blogs or whatever. I blog on different people's channels, as you all know. So I was blogging about my childhood sexual abuse. Anytime you're talking about children and sex, then it breeds controversy, okay? And so I decided to I've decided to do a video just to kind of put a frequency with some of the things I said, and just kind of like, break things down or whatnot, so you can understand from an occult standpoint the significance of those things. Because you always hear about kids being molested and abused and so forth, but you never get an occult take in terms of what's happening and what that actually does to a child, okay? So from an occult standpoint, your root, right, is the foundation of your consciousness. You have various chakras, right? And people are familiar with the base chakra, which is your root. And so your root is responsible for your stability, okay? It's responsible for your grounding and thinking about things in a more sensible type of way, okay? But when your roots are damaged, right, kind of going back to the whole slavery thing in the movie Roots, right? So when your roots are damaged and someone is damaging your roots and your root chakra, then they are creating fear within that particular area, okay, of your consciousness, fear. And, it could be fear in terms of your self, image, right, of yourself, and fear in terms of your finances, fear in terms of things that deal with sex, right, because your genitals are where the root, at the base of your spine, where the root chakra is. So so this is what sexual abuse and molestation actually does to a child. So I was purposely taken most weekends to be molested, okay? And the thing is that I was shown pornography. So I was actually, before the age of 7, when my subconscious mind was being created, I was stimulated sexually. And so it really caused a whole lot of shame in terms of sex, because sex was supposed to be something hidden. And my mother always made me feel bad about like things concerning sex, like boys and stuff like that. So I was always taught to be super duper prudish, and like sex was like a bad or taboo type of thing, okay? And also when it came to like love with my parents, like they never showed like love outwardly. So if I saw my parents kissing or hugging or something like that, it always looked strange to me. It was like, why are they doing that? So this is not normal, okay? It's not normal. And so people think that when kids are molested, sexually abused, that really the culprit has some type of sexual attraction to the child. This is why kids are not raped, okay, and they're molested, because molestation deals with just stimulating the sexual area, right, of the kid. It's not really oftentimes penetrating the child, especially if it's a younger child. And that's because children are more androgynous. That's why they don't attract sexual partners, okay? So they're androgynous. So when you're androgynous, you're not going to attract anyone. That's why, like, when we get into like adolescence and like middle school and stuff like that, then like you start to become interested in the boys and the girls, whatever the case is, because your consciousness has become more disintegrated, and so you're more separated from your astral body. You see what I'm saying? So kids are not very far removed from spirit. You see what I'm saying? You're the closest to Jesus and the occult. Jesus is your soul, your solar plexus, the Son of God. And so your solar plexus is responsible for your will and your desire. So kids have a whole lot of soul. They have a whole lot. It doesn't matter what race, because I talk about in the occult how black people basically represent the root of humanity. Okay, and so like our race is considered to be closest to soul. That's why we have soul food, or our music is soul. Okay, so but regardless of what race, children are closest to the soul or the solar plexus, so they'll fight for a toy or fight for their will or cry and scream, whatever the case is, or to get what they want. Okay, so when you are putting root on a child and damaging that energy meridian, right, you are damaging the foundation of their consciousness, because all the other chakras are actually built upon the root. So it's like a house. So, if you're trying to build a house throughout your entire life and your roots are messed up, then somebody else can take that house from you. And so that's the purpose of actually putting root on someone. Like you hear people say, oh, they put root on so and so, like witchcraft or whatever. This is putting root on somebody to take somebody's inheritance for yourself. So this is something that's very alien, and it's something that's done intentionally, and it's not necessarily something that actually creates a sexual charge like the masses have been taught, like, oh, somebody is a sex offender or child predator, there's somebody who has a sexual attraction. No, it's more of a deviant behavior that is purposely done to destroy the kid and their consciousness and their foundation, which is their sense of self and security. So this is what the root chakra is for. So in addition to being molested, I had issues with, not receiving like nice things. So it's always this type of scarcity mindset or whatnot, where my mom would like buy me like hand-me-down stuff, or she would get like my clothes from the Salvation Army. Like I just posted a picture of me as a little girl, and so when I was a little girl, you could see like from my picture, my clothes were always like too big for me. Okay, so although she always had a plethora of clothes, she always had a bunch of clothes, I never really had things that were nice. I only got nice things during Christmas, and so very seldom was I bought anything between then and that time. You know what I mean? Even like for birthday, like I don't remember receiving gifts like that. You know what I mean? So it was always a scarcity type of thing. So my roots were damaged with molestation, regularly molested, shown pornography, and then there was a scarcity mindset that was created from a very young age. Okay, so that's done on purpose. Okay, and so really, when you are stimulating the sexual organs or whatnot during molestation, and you're doing this before the age of 7, you're creating a sexual demon. It's demonic. Okay, and so you're suppressing, you're creating sexual stimulation, but you're suppressing it by telling the kid, like for example, I was told that I was fast or promiscuous or whatever when I got in middle school, and I started to like boys and stuff like that. And so I was told, oh, you are a whore, whatever the case. Like I remember distinctly, actually, this incident that happened when I graduated from middle school. Yeah, I was 8th grade, graduated from middle school, and I hugged, one of my boyfriends, so I was like, oh, everyone's hugging, it didn't matter who it was. And, it was just like everybody, regardless of what it was, your sister or your girlfriend in class, or, your boyfriend in class or whatever, like everybody was just like celebrating and hugging. And so after that, my mother, like laid it into me, and she was like, you're such a slut. And so I was like, well, you acted like I went behind the building and like gave some, boy a blowjob or something, or I was like all like tonguing someone out in the corner, but because I hugged a boy, okay, this was just hugging him, she told me that I was a whore and I was a slut. And I remember this very distinctly. And I went to talk to my cousin, and who I really called my aunt because she's much older than me. And so, I was talking to my aunt basically, and so she was just crying with me because I was so hysterical. I was like, why would my mother call me a whore for hugging someone? Everybody was hugging people at the graduation ceremony, and so I touched a boy, so I must be a slut. So the thing is, I'm trying to tell you, the reason why I, pointed out that particular incident was because of the fact that I was purposely taken every weekend, most weekends, to be molested by her. And I found out later on that she was paid to do this, okay? That an elite paid her to have me molested. So she was purposely damaging my root chakra, stimulating a what you would call, and cultivating a desire for sex at a young age before the age of 7, and then bottling up that energy by constantly calling me fast and promiscuous, and then trying to paint a picture of me being a whore. So she was purposely being put in place to create the sexual stimulation and being a part of, creating that, and then bottling that up by telling me that I was a whore and a slut. But she was the one who was used to create that energy. You see what I'm saying? So these like secret societies or whatever, and these like Moloch societies, they purposely do this to create a whore. You see? So the root chakra was damaged so I could live from a place of insecurity and scarcity, so I could eventually be pimped out and sold off to an elite later on in life. Okay? So, and this kind of leads into my Lilith and Libra in the 8th house, because the 8th house is the house of Scorpio. I don't have a Lilith in Scorpio, but I have Lilith and Libra in the house of Scorpio, which is the 8th house. And so the thing is that people who have, Liliths in the 8th house, they have shame concerning sex. And so, like, for example, like my first, date was my senior prom. Like, I was not allowed to date. I was not really allowed to like talk to boys and stuff like that, on the phone or whatnot. And so, like, once I was able to, get away from home, right, and have some freedom, I lost my virginity very, very early. Okay, I think it was like around 18 years old when I was like, oh wow, I'm free, I can, do whatever I want, and I lost my virginity at that time as soon as I was able to leave home. And so when I did lose my virginity, my mother, she found out. And so when she found out, she actually chastised me for doing it. Okay, so, she wasn't like, oh, wow, she wasn't saying like, oh, hey, how was your first time, whatever the case is, or, talking to me in a reassuring way to say, hey, that's not something to play with. This is something sacred to human beings or whatnot. And, you should be, careful and that type of thing or whatnot. And kind of like showing me a more caring and, empathetic way in terms of, me losing my virginity. But she was very, like condescending about it. So she is a riddled rag of shit. Yeah. So the thing is that, for one, you took me to be molested almost every weekend, right? You created within me a sense of scarcity by making sure that I really had very little things, and that I was had hand-me-down clothes and that type of thing, although you had tons of clothes and tons of things yourself, okay? And so you created within me this whole thing about sexuality, right? And then you, on top of that, call me a whore, but you created a whore. So the thing about these secret societies is that they actually judge you for what they create, which creates what you would call a type of what is it called? Crucifixion. So these are what you would call competing cognitions. And so creating a desire for sex at a young age, and then for actually compounding or opposing that with telling someone to be prudish when it comes to sex or whatnot, and then punishing them or whatever for their sexuality, really goes to show that that she's a demon, that she really is a sellout slut. So I was sold out to an elite by her. I remember too distinctly what happened. I was like I said, I was shown pornography a lot when I was taken to be molested. And so in my diary, I wrote down a lot of the things that I was seeing in these pornographic films. I wrote it in my diary. And so when she found my diary, she was like, "Why'd you write this in your diary? Da 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 da." And so, I was very secretive, whatever, because I was always told not to like talk about it or whatever the case is. And so she actually whooped me. She like whooped me with an extension cord and left whelps or whatever all over my body. And so it was a severe whipping concerning that. And so as you can see, she purposely took me to be molested most weekends, okay? And then on top of that, when I was writing down the things that I actually saw on these pornographic films that I was shown on a regular basis, and she knew what was happening, she actually whipped me physically horribly. This was a horrible beating. So this is creating what you would call crucifixion within the consciousness, okay? And so the thing is that, that during that time when I would get my periods, I would have horrible periods. Like my periods would be absolutely like excruciating. Like my periods were so bad that I would, what is it? I would just be sprawled out. Like I couldn't like hardly, I would actually have to not go to school because they were just that horrible. So at my solar plexus region, it was unbearable. And what else? It was like basically my periods were so bad and debilitating that they were worse than my contractions when I had my daughter. That's just how horrible they were. So this all came from the damage of the root chakra. So my mother truly is a disgusting whore of the elite, and she gets paid for me to be married off to this elite who's absolutely worth nothing. Like he is a worthless riddled rag of shit. He's a psychopath. And so when it comes to psychopaths, I've talked about this, how they have no connection to the emotions. And because they have no connection to the emotions, and emotions is what you need for a really good orgasm, and what you need to actually have sex on a very holistic level. So since this man can give me that emotional stimulation, then it's going to push me into my crown. Okay, and I've talked about Meghan Markle and how she has that Lilith in Scorpio, but she's with Harry, and Harry's is a complete psychopath, has no connection to the emotions. Right? He purposely is fucking her over with the British press in order to fuck her, to basically to fuck her up, not to fuck her for real. You see what I'm saying? So he has a lazy dick. So since he has a lazy dick, and then she has to deal with like opposition from the British media and that type of thing, then, it's going to cause her to want to commit suicide or have like, have problems, mental problems and stuff like that with depression and anxiety and that type of thing, because her consciousness is not brought back down to the solar plexus and the genital area where Lilith and Scorpio resides. And Lilith and Scorpio is a very sexual sign, you see what I'm saying? Placement in the natal chart. And so since that's dormant and that's not being exercised and is laying dormant, it's poisoning her. Do you see what I'm saying? So that powerful energy needs to find expression. It's not going to find expression with a partner like Princess Harry. You know what I mean? It's not. I call him Princess Harry. The thing is that like if you see that, there's a video. It's called Siren's Milk by Melanie Martinez, and you can see that there's a man in the video that is sleeping with what you could equate to be Babylonia, which is like, a filthy rich whore. Okay. And so he at one point in the video like headbutts her, and so that's kind of like a blow to her crown, right? So he headbutts her, and then he rips all of her jewels all off of her, and then he's taking a duffel of all of her riches and stealing from her, and he's carrying a what is it what is it called again? It's like a bunch of, it's called faggots, actually, a faggot. So faggots is like a bunch of like leaves and sticks and that type of thing, right? And so that's what you would call a faggot. So Harry represents the person that headbutts her, right, by causing all of these mental issues, whatever the case is in terms of the British media, and carrying the faggot, you see what I'm saying, in his hand. Okay, so this is Princess Harry. So he purposely married her, and he was actually pretty much sacrificed by his family to marry Meghan Markle, because they know Meghan Markle has Lilith and Scorpio, and Lilith and Scorpios do have the potential to murder you. So they know about astrology and those placements and that type of thing. So they were like, oh, you know what? He's a ragbag. Go ahead and let him marry her. And if he happens to die, so be it. You know what I'm saying? So she's going to kill Princess Harry. Especially finding out all the stuff, whatever that's being disclosed. And, what is it? The thing that's so interesting, oh my gosh. The thing that's so interesting is that Thomas Markle astral body came to me. Crazy. I was just like, what are you doing here? You know what I mean? But I was like, oh, okay. I knew you probably would show up. So he was like, I was like, well, it wasn't surprising. I didn't know that he was coming, but I feel like it wasn't surprising that he would show up, okay? Because the thing is that Thomas Markle represents the dark aspect of Meghan Markle's personality, which is her subconscious, or her animus, the subconscious masculine. And so, like I said, Thomas Markle, I'm going to kind of slow down a little bit. Thomas Markle is somebody that, this is how she has relation to the British royal family, right? I think what Princess Harry is her 17th cousin or something. So he is basically her connection to the British royal family. And the British royal family, they're dirty. You know what I mean? It's like they are, like, if you think about the Wizard of Oz, right? You go back to the film of the Wizard of Oz. And so when Dorothy meets Professor Marvel, okay, and so Professor Marvel is basically a crook, right? He's the one that gets Dorothy caught up in chaos by, she goes to his caboose or whatever the case is, and so in his, outside of the caboose, it says the crowned heads of Europe. And so when she's talking to Professor Marvel, he's talking to her about Egypt, and of course he doesn't look Egyptian, he's a white man, and so he's talking to her though about Egypt. And he actually starts to tell her things about herself, but he's looking in her bag at her pictures, and this is how he's able to tell her things about herself, because he's a crook. You see what I'm saying? If you look at that clip from The Wizard of Oz and Professor Marvel and the false Egyptian, so like I've often talked about how, Meghan Markle is a real Egyptian, you see what I'm saying? But the British royal family are carbon copies, okay? They are carbon copies of Egyptian culture, and so all their kingdoms were birthed out of the kingdoms that started in Egypt. Okay, so they're not a part of the original elite family, and so this is basically represented by Professor Marvel. Okay, Professor Marvel in the Wizard of Oz with the crowned heads of Europe. Okay, just crowned crooks. And so, yeah, Thomas Markle came in, and he was very, very much like, authoritative with me or whatnot. And so he was like, don't mess with these people. He was like, Harry ain't shit, and he ain't never gonna be shit. You see what I'm saying? So these people are nothing but crooks. My daughter, unfortunately, has sold her soul. And so she's in a bad situation or whatnot, given the fact that, these people are just so, they're about destroying her, and he was like, I know that your dad is gone and he's passed away, but he's like, let me be your dad. Like, if these people come to you and try to reap your soul and take your soul, he's like, there's nothing. He said this, he told me as like a dad. Like, it was very, very heartfelt. And so he was like, the soul is not temporal. The soul lasts for eternity. It lasts forever. But the, jewels and all the stuff that these people offer, whatever the case is, that's temporal things. And so, you have to hold on to your soul. And, he was saying that, You know, if he were in the picture with his daughter, his daughter would not be in this predicament. You know, and he was real hood about it too. He was like, look, he was like, he said, if I was there, you know, he was like, and if, you know, if I'm your dad, he said, hey, people would have to pay to come to this wedding. You know, he said he'd be at the door collecting checks. You know, so since the elite want to come and actually spit on his raggy dick to go between, you know, my daughter's legs or whatever, and it's not worth anything, you know, because, you know, sex is very important to marriage, right? So that's why you can have your marriage annulled if you don't consummate your marriage, you know. So because of the fact that she has that Lilith and Scorpio, she doesn't have a partner that can stimulate that aspect, you know, of her genetic makeup, you know, and bring her down from her crown into her solar plexus and her root chakra region and bring her down because she's already reached perdition, then it's like, well, what is she with him for? That's very much incompatibility, you see? And so he was like, yeah, he was like, if I was your dad, I'd be at the door. He was like, honey, you have Lilith in the 8th house. 8th house is Scorpio. So it's, you know, very similar to Lilith and Scorpio. So if you give your soul to these people, you know, you're in the same predicament that she's in. And so he was like, hey, I'd be taking checks at the door. You can't get in here unless you give me $1 million. And he was like, you know what? That needs to be a fucking $1 million cashier's check. So you can't go ahead and cancel it. And what, you know, he said, set a quota. Say that, you know what? If I'm going to have 500 people at my wedding, then that needs to be $500 million. And if I don't get that quota, then the British royal family has to compensate for the difference. And those checks will not be made out to the bride and groom, but they'll be made out to the bride herself. And it'll be in a prenuptial agreement that no one else can touch that money but her. So when she starts to get depression and anxiety because of the fact that she has a psychopath that's not in touch with his emotions, right? So he can't really stimulate and please her and pull her away from the British media, right? And the psychological torture and torment that they've given her to her root and her solar plexus, where she has $500 million that she can just go ahead and just say, hey, I can get a real good fucking dick. You know what I mean? And have a nice place to stay, whatever, and be away from the British media. And I don't necessarily have to worry about this bullshit. You see what I'm saying? So he came in very much as a father, and I very much applaud him. And, you know, a lot of people have given Thomas Markle a whole lot of slack or whatever the case is, and how he's a bad father and this and the other. But when his astral body came into me, it was very much devoted, very authoritative, very much in terms of thinking things not so much with your heart but with your head, and making a sound decision. You see what I'm saying? And so, you know, I feel very bad for him. I do. I really do. I feel like Meghan, you know, despite the fact that, you know, her and her father have differences, and, you know, there may have been, you know, issues in terms of abuse of the feminine or whatnot, but because her dad is so evil, then he would not have gone for all the shit that's happened to her. See, the mom is very nice. What's her name? Doria? Her mom is very nice and sweet and kind and meek. You know what I mean? So whenever you have sharks around, you have someone like a little guppy fish. I'm not trying to say anything bad about her mom, but, you know, you have like somebody who, you know, is very docile or whatnot and miss some sharks, they're going to eat you up and they're going to intimidate you. You see what I'm saying? But someone like Thomas Markle, who really don't give a shit about stuff, he's not very easily intimidated by things. And so having her father there was, you know, is important, but they made sure that they painted her father as a bad person and painted a bad picture of him, so the dark side of her personality could not be integrated and not come with her to the kingdom. You see what I'm saying? So she could basically be more controlled and you know, and monarch programmed. And so she doesn't have that balance. And so therefore, you know, Meghan Markle's ego is very sweet, kind, and loving. You know what I mean? It's very, you know, it's a lot like her mom, you know what I mean? Type of thing. And so, yeah, Harry is really a disgusting, riddled rag of shit. You know, like, you know, her, yeah, her dad is like, he's worth nothing. Just like I said, he's absolutely worthless. And so she got some bullshit. She got sold off to some bullshit. You see? So nobody wants him. They're the crowned heads of Europe, that swindler crooks that's depicted in The Wizard of Oz. They're very old, crack slacks, really. You know what I mean? And they don't really mean anybody really any good. They're just about consuming people's souls or whatever, and destroying hybrids. Like all the hybrids, that marry into their family, they suffer and they don't last. They die. They get divorced. You know what I mean? They don't do very well, within that family. You have to ask yourself why. And it's because they're crooks. They're Professor Marvels, fake Egyptians. And so that's very much symbolized and depicted within the film of The Wizard of Oz. And so they need life from hybrids for their sustainability. And, to actually purposely target someone by doing hidden hand agendas, your hidden hand, hand gestures or whatnot, to like say you're shooting somebody. Like, that's really sick. And just kind of going back to my mother, and how she purposely took me to be molested, have my root chakra damaged, really, and having me to live from a place of scarcity. And on top of that, creating this Lilith and Libra in the 8th house sexual shame by making me feel bad about something that she was a part of cultivating. She's a sick, really sick piece of shit slack. Yeah. There's really nothing to really describe how evil and disgusting she is. Like my mother, like she knew that, my clothes were, stolen in Vegas, and, what happened with my car in Atlanta because my job was not transferred, and so I ended up losing my car, which is what all my other clothes I rebought back, was in there. And so, I don't have that. And so when I was coming back, home or whatever afterward, trying to kind of get myself together and kind of reestablish myself, saying, okay, I'll come back for a little bit, try to figure it out. And so they made sure that they sent me a message that they wanted me to be in poverty, and that they don't really truly give a shit about me eating, truly. Because this is a bag that I would take to work, and so I would, this was a lunch bag that I would oftentimes take to work. And so, when I got back, they had put bullets in my lunch bag. And she had put a ton of, bullets, actually, in my lunch bag. So as you can see here, a bag full of bullets. So she was sending me the message that she's a part of, the whole thing in terms of damaging my roots, right? And so she's like, well, you can eat bullets, basically. When I asked her, I was like, well, Mom, do you think I should starve? Because, I was like, obviously, because like every time I eat something is when she calls me to do something, because she's elderly. And so I was like, okay, well, you know what? My sister and my brother will get a break. I'll come to help out. So, in the mornings, I make her breakfast and I administer her medications. At night, if my sister doesn't do it, I cook her food or I heat her food up. I make sure she gets her night meds. I clean up for her, in her room or whatnot. And, there have been times that she's fallen. I've called the, fire department, whatever the case is, to, to help her get up off the floor. Like, people who do the job that I do, they get paid about like $2,000 or so every month, at least. And so, it's called sitting work or whatever the case is, like when you're taking care of the elderly. And I don't get paid any money. And so, like, I would go to, if I go to fix something to eat or something like that, she's like, well, you need to ask every single time that you get something to eat. And, I don't want you eating this or eating that or whatever, because I really like this and like that. So, she's basically, like some type of shitty ass program, basically, to me. She looks like somebody put there by the elite to reinforce this severe destruction of the root and to reinforce the fact that there's a scarcity mindset, you know, that we want you to be totally helpless and reliant upon a crack slack, you know. He's got like some dirty, dusty manna between his legs. Like in the Bible, you know, they talked about, you know, how the false Jews or whatever that came from Egypt, and so they like, I think it's the book of Numbers, I think, right? Numbers or Leviticus, and they start talking about how they didn't really have anything to eat, you know, except for like manna. And so I think it's like equated to matzah, right, which is like a Ritz cracker. And so they were like, our soul loatheth this light bread, right, or this light manna, or whatever they call it, matzah. And so this is all about destroying my soul, making sure if you eat something, that you don't eat something that you even want or you even desire, because we're making sure that you don't have a job. I talked about my situation, my last job that I was at, and how they fired me the day after MLK Day, saying that they had revamped. They didn't fire me, but they said that they had let me go because they revamped their program. And I said to myself, like, okay, my last day of work was Friday, so we were off Saturday, Sunday, and Monday for MLK Day, and all of a sudden on Tuesday when I get there, before I get into the building, you're telling me that I have to turn back around because of the fact that you've gotten rid of the program that I was working at. And I bust my ass too, trying to work very hard to, you know, to do what I needed to do for that position. So the thing is that the elite, they're all about destroying the Jews, pushing us into the ghettos, basically pushing us into poverty, using everything they possibly can down to our families to make sure that we are in poverty. Who actually invites someone to come back to their home, right, which is your mother, and then she puts bullets in your lunch bag? Are you serious? Like, that is the most disgusting thing I've ever seen in my entire existence. And also too, knowing that my clothes were taken or whatever the case is, she you know, I would see like clothes that she wouldn't wear because she has a ton of shit. So, you know, clothes that she hasn't worn or whatnot in years. When I say years, like maybe like 20, even 30 years, like she hasn't worn. And so, you know, I'm like, oh, okay, she hasn't worn these clothes in like 2 decades. You know, she's not going to care about this shirt or whatnot. She can't fit it. She's elderly. She has a set amount of clothes that she wears anyway. She doesn't really go anywhere. And so she's like, why do you have on my shirt? And I'm like, well, I don't have any clothes. And so she's very upset about me wearing her clothes, although she has a whole bunch of clothes. Okay? So this is the elite. And so I'm expecting an elite with a shitty, raggy dick to come to me to say, you know what, honey? I am here for you, and I'm here to save you from all of that, you know, all of these problems that you're having, you know, and so I'm here to make it better. But really, he's here to get paid between my legs. So really, to be honest with you, this is very disgusting. These societies, secret societies, and the people that are a part of these secret societies are really pathetic and desperate. So you have a slut that is basically causing scarcity in me. So she can, you know, a leak can justify coming to save the day and giving me, I don't know, what do I like? I really love sushi, and, you know, I love puppies, and, you know, I want a Pomeranian puppy. Like, you know, I want all these different things or whatnot. But despite how hard I've worked in my life, and despite the good character that my mother told me that will take me places that degrees will not, I still gotta fuck a rag bag of slacks for some fucking good grade sushi, for some fucking Pomeranian puppies, for a fucking car that I don't fucking own, to fucking suck your worthless dick in a fucking mansion and a house that is not in my fucking name. Like, that's really sick. You see what I'm saying? So this is what it comes to, down to selling the soul. So these things like puppies and, you know, whatever, food, all those things are temporal, you see? But the soul exists throughout time. It's not temporal, you see? So this is why, you know, Thomas Markle came in and he said, if you have an elite come to ask you for your soul, knowing exactly what he's having your family do, having your neighbors stalk your, what is it, social media and stuff like that, and, you know, on alias channels that even your family doesn't know, the fact that you've been molested, and that type of thing, and you get nothing but a fucking sandwich and a fucking dog, some Gucci and some Prada. He's like, honey, that's not worth anything. You see what I'm saying? He was like, he kind of showed me some images of certain things. Like, for example, a lot of black people were programmed with a show called A Different World. And one of the major, like, what you call it? Like, one of the major, let me put this back. But one of the major things, or like incidents or events that happened on A Different World was, what is it? Dwayne and Whitley's wedding. And so she was to be married off to an elite, okay, or whatnot. And her mom, was trying to get her married off to the elite. And so she was like, Whitley was very skeptical because all she kept thinking about was Dwayne. And so her mom was like, when they was like, do you want to take, this elite to be your husband? And so she started seeing Dwayne. And her mom was like, I will. Trying to, like, pretend like it's her voice or whatnot. So her mom was saying, I will. But then when Dwayne showed up, she said, I do. You see what I'm saying? So going back to astrology, whatever the case is, because astrology is very much has a lot to do with destroying the 144,000 and destroying the Jews. And so when she said, I will to the elite, that represents non-unification of the nodes. So your ego, your consciousness stays separated from your subconscious, which is connected to the elite. You see what I'm saying? Whereas when it came to, so there's like a separation within your consciousness, but when it came to Dwayne, she said, I do. So doing something means that you're actually in the present moment. You're doing something. You're not waiting to die to go to heaven. You see what I'm saying? You're not saying, I will do something. So, like, everybody on earth is like, oh, I will, everybody has treasures in heaven that haven't been grounded through the ego. So people are like, oh, I will go to, I don't know, Tahiti, or I will have this business, or I will have this amount of money, or, I will, have this lover or whatnot, or this career, whatever the case is, these children, this family. But, Dwayne represents her soul. It represents, it's not I will do something. It's not the future moment, but it's the present moment. I do. So I do and I will are very different. And so doing is unification of the nodes, okay? Is unification of what your intentions are, and what what your intentions are, and actually doing what your intentions are is holy. Whereas when it comes to this elite is like, no, you are going to be a slave and you're going to die and go to heaven. You're not going to have heaven on earth. And so I want to have unification of my nodes and have heaven on earth and be a holy person. And that's what I aspire to do. I don't aspire to be married off to an elite that is working in conjunction with someone to torture and punish me, so they can actually come and save the day and be a savior, so he can actually get fucked right. So, when it comes to destroying the Jews and stealing from the Jews, basically, I don't know, it's like the person that buys the Jew, like a slave, they get to get fucked right and have honey with their money. And then the people that are selling the Jew out, like my mother here, putting bullets in my lunch bag. And I'm sure that she has something to do with it, because my father, there's a lot of, conspiracy concerning the death of my father and how my father died in the ditch in front of our house, okay? So, and my mother's actually thrown away food and stuff like that I have, bought personally before, whatever. My father was the one that bought it back. So this is associated with her, but she's Judas, so she gets paid by the elite. So the elite gets fucked, all right? She is a elite slut, so she's Judas, so she gets to have, whatever she wants. And the people that are watching this, that are jacking off to my pain, they get an energetic charge. So everyone gets paid except for me. And I get what you would call a mind fuck, because I've been taught ever since I was younger that I wasn't shit. You know, my mom actually straightened my hair every day before the age of 7. Almost every day before the age of 7 before I went to school. So she literally straightened my hair. So she was programming me to believe that my hair wasn't worth shit. You know what I mean? And so it's like, well, you are ugly, you're black, so you're ugly. You see what I'm saying? So if you're telling somebody they're, ugly because they're black, and, I would have family members like say, oh, you're getting dark in the summer and stuff like that. And so they would call me white girl or whatever the case is. So there was a lot of like, racial things going on or whatnot to basically make me feel bad about my melanin, about being black. You see what I'm saying? So, being sold out and being programmed before the age of 7 at a young age that, I wasn't good enough or whatnot, it really goes to show that this is very disgusting, and that the elite is really not worth anything. Like, he really is a poor, dusty man of dick. A dusty Ritz matzo, not even a matzo ball, but a matzo cracker between my legs. You know what I mean? Like, he really truly is worth nothing. And so that's very disheartening, very disheartening that my own mother would know that my clothes have been stolen, and, and I've worked so hard to have what I need, and she doesn't even want me to have a washed out t-shirt that she hasn't worn in 2 decades, and she's upset about me wearing it. And she tells me to get up every day, to cook her breakfast and administer her medications, and to clean up for her, and to bring her this, that, and the other. And if something happens, I'm the person that actually has to call the first responders or whatever the case is to take care of her. And so this is purposely bottling up energy or whatever to piss me off. You know what I mean? So it's like it can't be expressed the way that it needs to be. And so that's being done on purpose to destroy and poison the soul, and to make the soul look nasty and filthy and dirty and disgusting. So it's kind of like poking an animal like in a cage. You keep poking that animal, it makes you angry. But if you do something or you say something, then, you don't have a place to live. You don't have love and support. You don't have these different things. So she's being used as a tool to create enough pain and suffering, so it takes away my soul, so an elite can actually rape me with his shitty cock at the shitty walk, basically. That's very sick. But these are very sick people. She's a very sick person. She's absolutely worth nothing. Yeah. My mother, she's worth nothing. Worthless. When I say worthless, she's beyond worthless, actually. So, for someone to take me to be molested, and then tell me I'm promiscuous for hugging a boy, whipping me for writing down things in my diary that I was purposely shown in pornography, and whipping me for what she actually took me to actually observe. Like, that really is somebody that is very cruel and heartless and worthless. And the person that paid her, that plans to scoop some pussy off the floor because he's here to make sure that I get this and that and that and this and temporal things, and I have to pay again. It's not like I've been through enough torture. But he's like, no, on top of the torture that you've been, that you've endured, you have to fuck me for basic necessities and the things that you want and that you desire. That's fucking disgusting. You know what I mean? So, and the thing that's really, one thing about me, I can actually empathize with anyone, and, get into people's shoes to feel what they're feeling or whatnot. But really, the thing that's so bad about this is that these people are trying to hide it. When I asked my mother, I'm like, do you want me to starve? She's like, no, I don't want you to starve. But really, she put bullets in my lunch bag. That wasn't in my lunch bag before I left here and I moved to Atlanta. She's actually thrown away my food, eaten my food. Listen, I barely can afford anything. And so she eats my shit, and she said, you can't have mine. Or you have to ask for every single morsel of food that you want here. I'm like, okay, well, you know what? When you go to the grocery store or whatever, why don't you consider me, since you're paying me absolutely nothing, okay, to take care of you? You know, I was told by the neighbor next door that, you know, because the neighbor asked, well, how's your mom? I said, well, you know, she's, you know, doing a little bit better. She had a heart attack or whatever the case is. She's suffered a couple of strokes, but, you know, she's doing, you know, much better. And so the neighbor was like, oh, you know that you can get money if she has Medicaid or whatever. You can get money about 20 hours a week for taking care of your mom. And so I didn't ask for it for me because my sister helps out as well. So I was like, you know what, that's something that my sister definitely could take advantage of. But because my mother makes too much money, then she doesn't qualify for that, for Medicaid. So I'm having someone that's not paying me a salary because she qualifies. She has too much money, so she doesn't qualify for Medicaid. She's not wanting me to actually wear clothes that she actually can't fit anymore and that she hasn't worn for over 2 decades. And if I eat something here, right, and I need to eat in order to be able to fix her food and have energy to do things for her, then she's upset. So she's purposely being put there by the elite and being used as an instrument for me to be in poverty. Bullets. Who puts bullets in someone's lunch bag? If you're going to store bullets, wouldn't you store it like in some type of container? Or wouldn't you store it like, you know, in something like, you know, some type of gun case or something like that? But no, she said, you know what? When it comes to me or whatever, I really don't care. This is saying I don't give a fuck about you. I sold you off into slavery, and I'm waiting for this person to actually unground you enough, right? Going back to your programming and reaping all the torture, all the abuse that you have suffered, right? I'm waiting for someone to come and reap that so I can get paid off of you as a bottom bitch of Rome, and for that piece of fucking crack slack, for him to actually get a nut off of you. So he gets a nut off of you. I get paid off of the nut that he actually gets off of you. And the people that are involved in this and is watching this shit go down, they get to get an energetic charge from it. I hope you fucking enjoy. Okay? So, you know, I think that does it for me or whatever, guys. And I'll see you in my next video.